Yeah, if you want to. Drive. Yep.
Exclamation point.
Thank you. Okay, ready? All right, good morning, everyone. We're here for a work session with EDC, city, and other partners. We've got the rec department here and Tamara from the EDC. And seems like you got a PDF queued up. Do we want to go right into that or any other preliminary words?
Some preliminary words.
Sure.
This meeting, so this work session got set or requested to set on the kind of in relationship with, and I want to just back up and recognize the school district, PB Swims, the community, all the different entities have been working at a pool, getting it rehab, getting it rebuilt, whatever it's going to be, the rec center, all these different arenas, and just on the heels of sort of these conversations with the pool being attached to the ballot and the school district just determining in the end that it would not be on there, very much feeling the tension of our community and how we drive this forward and how we take the next steps and keep this moving for basic delivering, not having this piece in place. And just to kind of add a little color, I'm sure everybody in the room knows that the EDC has been in a pretty intensive realignment in the last 10 months. And we are almost through the hurdles and we'll be launching and rolling out the newly formed EDC here in the next few months before the end of the year and hopefully October, late October, early November. But business goes on and this issue is a real one that has been being tackled and addressed for years for many of you. And so the EDC, just to give you a sneak peek of where we are landing, is with the collective impact approach. And there is no better place to address that than right here. And so collective impact in a very simple statement is exactly how it stands or sounds. Identifying your stakeholders, making sure all those stakeholders are at the table together and that we're rowing together in the same direction. And when we identify priority that the county, the community, the city, the EDC, all of the collective businesses, that all of those folks determine is a priority, that we are then engaging all of those stakeholders together to the best possible outcome. So through those conversations, as the pool got removed, we immediately, and it became clear that a work session needed to happen and had not formally happened at this point. So that was requested, that was supported by the VOCC. And so here we sit, and today, we can pull that up and essentially,
PowerPoint?
yeah.
Okay.
The agenda that I've laid out at this point is really about us identifying stakeholders so we know who's in the room. And thank you all for showing up today. This is a pretty impressive between the who's on up there and who's in the room. We can see that this is an important piece that we're working on. And this is the beginning of sort of identifying those stakeholders and making sure we can go, do I have control?
You
Do I
can
have
use
control?
that,
I
yeah.
can?
Totally.
And then how does it go? How do I make it go?
Just click the mouse, the left button.
Or you can use the arrow key down here too if you need to go back.
There you
I'll get it, it's cool. So the agenda I put together was kind of in this fashion. Structure for the session, focus, intention. I think I've kind of said a little bit, the EDC kind of in this collective impact role is looking at the facilitation or helping to ensure and support on these priorities that we do have all those stakeholders present and that those voices are being equitably heard and that we are moving forward from that state. And for today, we're not gonna suddenly find $30 million to go build a rec center or to rehab, everything's not gonna get decided today. But can we walk out of here making sure that we've identified the key stakeholders? And within that, all of you are gonna have voices of folks that we need to add to this list who aren't here. Relevant assets, resources among all of us. So when I say that, I'm kind of getting at the idea that rowing together, we're all probably gonna end up giving a little and taking a little to come to the final piece. And I think this, personally, from an EDC standpoint, we believe this is a wonderful priority for all of us to engage in and test our ability to do this collective impact piece to make sure that everybody is together in this process and to identify together. Then that means what assets do we hold, what resources do we hold, and kind of getting those laid out. And we might have to add to this as we move along. And hopefully we can move through with some kind of next steps, milestones, and not necessarily have everything mapped out today, but get to a very clear picture so that we can all buy into this process and say, okay, we're on board and we're moving forward. Of course, we're coming into budget season, so let's touch on it briefly and determine what considerations we need to be aware of for 2024, and then next specific steps. Does anybody want to add anything to that feels important to this moment? Sweet.
Well,
Yes.
can I just add I think for me, something that really, this probably fits in the budget considerations, and we probably don't want to go into it in too much depth today, but, we're talking about one priority that's not necessarily the first on the list
What's
of the rec center, right? I mean, we've got other things that we've been working on and trying to put in place, housing, transit, justice center, like, we have to see where all the childcare, we have to see where all those fit in. And, at some point, we really need to chat with the city on any financial planning, that they're rolling out or preparing, because I think that's been a big, challenge to have these shared goals and ventures, and then we're not moving really at the same pace. So it feels like that conversation really, ideally maybe should have happened before this one, but I understand we're talking the rec center alone here. All of those things really play into that. And I think that'll get into the budget, maybe at the budget piece.
Yeah, well, and I think all those pieces we need to get to, and I think we can all agree that childcare is a huge issue in our community. And as we look at something like this, I would offer that we're not looking at it through the lens of just a place to go work out. While I do believe, and I think many voices in here might agree, that our youth being able to learn to swim is an important asset. But beyond that, this is an integral part of a beginning around what creates an attractive environment for our families to want to live and grow and thrive. And can we get a hold of something here and have some success around it? And it may not be that this is BOCC or county funding solely that we're looking at as well, but how do we work through that piece? So it is somehow a question that I put in there when we get to that section for sure. And I think one of the things that I've noticed is there's a lot of voices happening around us around this conversation. And can we get everybody together in a room and not necessarily have all the answers today, but start to map something out?
Mhm.
So anything else that anybody wants to say or add at this point? Left side. So I think we kind of touched on this for now. The EDC itself, I can speak to in terms of where we sit is wanting to support the greater good of the community and of the economic development of Lake County. And as I just mentioned, viewing this as a potentially something for us to look at as a place for us to model this collective impact together, and how we do identify all these stakeholders, and we do identify and not necessarily get stymied by the fact that we don't know exactly where that funding comes from right this second, but let's get together and start moving forward in this. And I guess what I would say about the EDC is we are poised and ready to jump on board, and I've kind of named this already, in terms of helping facilitate and continuing to keep the cadence moving and to keep momentum happening, and making sure that we are representing collectively the needs of the community. And that also comes down to what is the appropriate, like in this case, what's the EDC's role might be helping with some of the data collection that helps us, and that might be some that's already in existence from work that's already been done and additional, but that's sort of the role of the EDC. I don't necessarily want to speak for everybody else. Obviously, everybody here is going to have an intrinsic role, and I think ultimately we're going to need the county, the city, PB Swims, the school district, everybody in this together, not just for this piece, and to not take this as a priority over childcare, transportation, or any other asset or priority that we have, but in how we are looking at the whole picture of where we're going. So, to that end, any questions there? And I would just say, as we, the hope is that we are going to start to move towards hearing from everybody in this room. And as we do that, I want to recognize and acknowledge that there are multiple entities who've been working at this for some of you years, and seeing this. And there is a lot of heart and soul and energy and momentum and different elements tied up in that. And so how we come into this room today and find the resources forward is also about us being able to open just a tiny bit and hear, and making sure that we're staying open to everything and everyone in the room and the different potential layers that we're going to hit and how we move through those things together. So what I have identified, and I'd like everybody's help with, as we're talking about something like this, who are the stakeholders that we need to have on this list? And just to make sure that we're covering off, this is just the folks who are in this room at the moment. Adam, I think you're on there, right?
Yeah, he's on there.
Can they hear me?
They should be able to.
So I've identified Lake County, certainly what's that? Perfect. City of Leadville, the EDC, PB Swims, the business community, the community of Leadville, the school district, youth organizations, CMC. Who else are we missing that we need to be thinking about? And this is, yes?
Lake County Public Library.
Yes! I put the library picture on there, did you see that?
I sure did.
So let's put that on there. Who's got the?
We can take notes too.
I will add these things in. I had done this, but it doesn't really work this way because it's not coming from my screen. But I'll make notes and then I'll send it back out. No, it's okay.
All right.
I can do it on here. I'm gonna make notes because you're gonna see as we move through this, that the intention would be that we do talk through stakeholders and then also the roles of those stakeholders. And I'm open to shifting things around on the agenda. So Sarah, if you feel like we need to shift this a little bit and we bring the budget stuff up first, it can happen that way too.
No, want to hijack most of the meeting.
Leave the senior center.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get some things on there. So senior center, Who else?
Library.
And I will fix this and send it back out, and we'll make sure we've got everybody. Do we have some kind of attendance so that I can get this out to everybody? Or can we have some? kind of
Yeah,
attendance?
sure, we can do that.
I think we're recording this work session for this purpose as well, so that'll be posted so folks can also listen to it later if they want.
And I could just send it back with the edited version and,
Yeah.
yeah, that's fine. Okay, so I got senior center, library, who else?
Is there a Latinx group that we should have involved?
Who's that?
A Latinx group?
Yes.
Um,
Latino leaders.
yeah,
Leaders.
the Laderas.
Well, do we wanna go like full circle, like into those groups, or what would be?
I think both organizations kind of wraps them all together. Youth organizations kind of wraps them all together.
I was just thinking too, with adults too,
Yeah.
Yes,
but I think since there's so many that don't know this.
the family and,
Full circle.
Oh,
Yeah.
for the youth, or, yeah.
Yeah.
Been here.
the goal does as well.
Ladera's separate now, didn't Ladera spend it, yeah, so that's why I was thinking it'd be good to have them.
Others that you can think of that are not here right now?
I would think that when you, not at the front end, but when you get to the planning stages for design, maybe C4 might
Mhm.
want to be involved.
Stuff.
Also in that same category of sort of, I'm curious about BV groups.
Yeah.
They can get to Salida too, but
Well, and the idea has been to certainly, as we get through, at least on our side, the realignment is to work closely with Chafee, and Jake and just their whole system down there. I know another rec center, the rec center picture that was on there was Fruta, so I know that's a model that PB Swims has looked at, and maybe there's other entities like that, but for us locally, to me, Chafee makes sense as well. Who else?
Maybe the cog, but
Did you say card?
yeah.
Maybe.
there might be another list of folks, like once we start thinking about funding mechanisms, there might be some more organizations that crop up.
Like Dola and such, yeah.
Dole County, yeah.
Yeah, Dole, for sure.
May we request that when you're speaking up there, that you speak to us as opposed to just speaking among yourselves? Because we're not hearing every word
Okay,
you say.
sorry, yeah.
Happy to repeat it, Elaine.
Well, I picked it up, but I had to listen very carefully. So, yeah, just.
Good feedback, thanks. Thank you. So we'll leave that, and, I think with this piece, this can always change and we can add to it as we move through, and I think to everybody's point here, as we are moving along, other organizations and entities will naturally arise, so we'll add those as we move through. And my hope from there kind of, and to keep that going, and if you think of people, reach out, we'll add it. So what my hope is to kind of touch into each group and let each group have, if we can shoot for around 10 minutes or less, and just kind of hear from each of these groups. And I think part of this is as much about sharing where you've been and having a chance to have those voices united in this room together and or heard all together as well. The EDC is a little bit different in that we haven't been sitting at the table working at this project for 5 years like some of the folks here, and I know that there are different facets who have been looking at this issue for quite some time. And if we use this just as an information gathering, but maybe also priorities that are important to you around this issue. And again, I'm just gonna caveat that with neutral, so we're finding that neutral space. And that's gonna be something for all of us to work through together, I think. We all have our different views and different energies wrapped in this, so if we can hold that piece. And think about assets that your organization or your team may have, and resources that, and or assets could be physical, literal assets. Resources could be human, they could be different types of, potentials down the road that you see. It could be other groups outside of even Lake County. So, for example, and I put us first just to kind of talk through this, and ours will change as well. But our priorities would be to provide neutral, consistent facilitation of the process, however we can support that. It would be to align around what our community wants, to really make sure that we are representing fully what is best, but it's also data-driven. So not just, and this could be support, it could be us leading. We're kind of open to working through this with the county and whoever and deciding what role the EDC together might be, but also helping support that data collection, which means collection of data that's already in place, but also if we're gonna look at a feasibility study that is directly aimed at the right center for here, or renovation of those pieces, that we make sure that we would be willing to step in and lead that, and that would be a priority for us to make sure that it is coming from a collective data-driven basis that is, and I think the piece of that feels really important to, and we've identified this, I think we've all identified this in this room. How do we touch the people who don't show up in the room? How do we get the information, the input, the needs and wants and the data from those folks? It's from the race series, I see the same thing. I can either hear all the people who want to tell me what doesn't work or what does work. But I really need the people that I don't get to talk to, because that's who's not getting, and they're impacted.
I'm just gonna borrow this from real quick.
Yep.
Check the chat, sorry.
Thank you. So I think for us, making sure that as we start to do these pieces right now, and we'll get to Adam and the pros and kind of what the county is thinking and what all of those directions are, what each of you are thinking, but then to make sure that we stay in the EDC role committed to making sure all voices equitably are included in the process.
I think that's more of a communication piece too, so, because you can end up, as Jeff and I experienced somewhat with the Justice Center project too, where your group of stakeholders ends up being so large that a lot of times there are, I think, some gaps in the information that gets out. So maybe it's different areas of stakeholders for what purpose they would be listed. And one might be who are your stakeholders for communications purposes.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Well, and I also think, the EDC itself has the ability to potentially help build a container around that. And not that we do every part of it, but that we help build a container. I think, to your point, Sarah, and everybody in here, there are so many priorities. There's so many things on the list. And how do we tackle them and not get stuck? And how do we make sure that there's momentum? And for us, I think where we're coming out of our realignment is our goal is to really help pick up some of those pieces and some of those gaps and keep it a neutral facilitation moving forward. So that's something, obviously, we need to take to our board and see if they're willing to support that. But we would potentially either help lead that and or look at how we can fund that so that it's not something that we're buying for other duplicative resources that are needed somewhere else. Additional resources that the EDC itself, and I'm just trying to give us kind of an idea of what I'm shooting for, so when we get into this and we can come back to different areas and kind of let things surface as they will. So resources that the EDC may have as well, obviously humans to help execute, but also potentially developers, potential individuals or groups interested in investing in the future of Leadville. And I think what we're seeing on the EDC side is we do have a handful of folks who are really interested in investing in the future of Leadville, and this is an opportunity for us as a group of stakeholders to make sure we drive them the way we want to drive them and have them support us the way that we want them to support us. So what are we identifying? And then the EDC can help facilitate the use of some of those folks in the direction that actually fits with Lake County and where it's headed. So this is kind of an example of what I'm hoping for in terms of us doing a little bit of a review and what we have and to get some voices starting to move. And my guess is there'll be some conversation as we get to some of these stakeholders that needs to get aired out, and let's do it. Let's go ahead and get these pieces out here and make sure we're all on the same page. I put next up, who did I put? Let's just see. I put City of Leadville, Lori.
Great.
I knew that you might have a timing issue, so I wanted to make sure to also get you.
Well, thank you, and thanks for checking in about this on Friday. I think that was very helpful. So
Yeah, I mean, we obviously have a new asset that we are looking to figure out how it fits into all the other plans and the things that are going on and needs in the community. I think my personal perspective is there are so many needs in this community that there is plenty of room for lots of ideas and lots of spaces. I think our biggest problem is probably resources. We have more need than we have resources for, and I think the pool is a big priority for our community. And so I would love for the city to be involved in that planning process. I have some personal ideas about how we get the resources to get there, but
Right?
yeah, I mean, personally, I think one of the key strategies we need to be talking about is a fiscal analysis of what needs to be, what we want, how much it's gonna cost, and then looking at a recreation tax.
So summarize your priorities for me one more time, Lori, I'll get on top of that, hopefully. Oh, maybe I can't do that. I don't want to do it. So to hear what you were sharing, asset-wise, you named the new building that you guys have acquired.
Correct.
Yeah.
And the vision for that is more not recreation center as much as community center. So I think there's a need for both, but given the space, I don't think that it makes as much sense to try and make that a recreation center as much as a community center. So we're talking about what we've been hearing from the community is space to hold events. Birthday parties, the upstairs could be used for that, office space for communities or organizations in the community. And then the downstairs space to be used as indoor space for like everything from, we've heard movie night, we've heard gymnastics, we've heard walking track, we've heard ping pong tables, foosball tables, beanbag chairs, so indoor space, not necessarily, it involves activity, but not purely like, we're not looking at doing, a true recreation center with full complement of, equipment and that type of thing. So that's what we're hearing.
Mm-hmm. What questions are in the room for the city around their priorities, assets, resources, those pieces? What question marks do you have? Anything right now?
And let me talk about just resources for a second. So resources, I think you only have a couple income streams for projects like this. You have, for true income streams, you have donations and tax. Those are income streams. If you're looking at resources, you can also look at, you have grants, but those are like donation type based, but you have the general fund. And I think for us to have a steady income stream, we need to look at a recreation tax and a broad recreation tax so that there's a steady income stream to fund whatever we decide our priorities are. But without a steady income stream, you don't have maintenance, you don't have ongoing operation.
So to recap that, like priority wise, one of your priorities in terms of, as it relates to this, is to get the community center habitable in some form or another.
Correct.
For events, gatherings, potentially youth hangout, teen spot kind of thing.
You and I talked about, the potential for family/childcare, family space where a parent could go and do something themselves while their children are also able to do something. So maybe not straight up childcare, but something where, again, we're hearing that there's a lack of family space, a lack of youth space. We're hearing that folks like, if you live in a mobile home park, you don't have a place for a birthday party. Or if you're, we're hearing from the youth in high school that there's a really great need for they were just saying, place to go, beanbag chairs and coffee tables, so that kind of space, indoor space.
Mm-hmm. And are you open to input, suggestions, brainstorming, let's call it, around that center as well?
Yeah, so we have a team of students from CU, the architecture and planning students, who are hearing, so we met with Roxy Aldez's class, so that's kind of how this started. They presented to the county and they presented to us and talked about the lack of indoor space. So we met with that class. And we said, look, you guys were the ones who brought this idea to us, let's talk about what you were thinking about. So we met with them. Christian gathered basically the Latinx community together. We had a meeting last week to hear what their needs are. And so we want to keep having those meetings. There's going to be a meeting with seniors and then a community-wide meeting so that we can get brainstorming ideas and then the students can kind of flesh out what could fit in the building. And the idea is to get enough community input so that, and there's more ideas than there is space. That's the bottom line. There's more ideas to put in there than there is actually a physical space. But the idea is to continue to meet with groups until we figure out what could fit in the building.
And where are you right now with, if there's some rehab that needs to happen with the building?
We don't own it yet, so we need to we close this week, so once we have the keys, we can start working on that project.
And is that
There's no inspection?
Correct. We have all the things that the owner knows needs to be done, but we did not have an inspection on the building.
And will that be something that you will pursue after we close? With the plan to understand what needs to be, like what would be the mechanism to ensure it is asbestos is out or whatever needs to happen?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and that's a long process. I mean, I think we know that we bought a building that needs work. And the owner has done he's done some work, but I think there's still a lot of work to be done. So it may not be something that we can, it's an older building. There may be things we find that make it we might not be able to open it next winter, but we'll find out.
Any questions?
I had a question just on sort of like site analysis for any pool or aquatic center or larger rec center, whether there's space on that lot or if there's any other city-owned spaces to sort of throw on the list for consideration with any planning. I don't have a mental list of
So if you
city-owned
look
properties.
from an aerial view, from west to east, it's an entire city block.
Yeah,
So the first section is the parking lot, which someone estimated at 60 spaces. I don't think it's 60, but there's a parking lot.
Yeah.
And then there's the building, which is, I think it's about 19,000 square feet. I don't know if that was counting the two uninhabitable structures, but it's around 19,000 square feet. But then the rest of the block going
Yeah.
east is, we will be owning that portion too. And so
Yeah.
that is to be determined, that space. I mean, I think the first priority is to figure out what we can do to get the indoor space, because to me, that seemed like that was the biggest priority for, especially the youth, was to have a place to go in the winter. And then so that land.
yeah. No, I just asked, I mean, like, thinking about planning going forward, we'd wanna have two or
There are lots of ideas for that space.
Can you just repeat that for the Zoom? I'm sorry, Lori.
The whole thing.
We
You
know
started
what
getting
it
the
is.
Zoom.
Yeah, so when I first started with the city. What part do you want me to start from, Gayla?
Just what you were talking about with the soccer,
Yeah, so that additional land, right now it has two uninhabitable structures on it.
Okay.
And so my understanding is those structures will need to be taken down and that land would be available for some potential. I mean, obviously it makes sense to make that some type of outdoor or recreation space. So some ideas were to create a pavilion for, you know, events, concerts, weddings, that type of thing, family events, and/or soccer. So Summit County has partially covered soccer fields, so something like that, or pool.
I like what you're saying, Jeff, in terms of, I think this is in it. Let me try to help with that a little bit. I think this is really about identifying every possibility that we may or may not use. You know, from rehab to what's on that lot and what's usable. And as you're saying, it's just getting a list of the full assets and then being able to look at it and understand. I think once you do that, we get a better picture moving forward of a plan that actually tackles, when we match the data with what we have, what's the right location and the right pieces. So if we can all think outside of the box a little bit in terms of those elements and just understanding, and as we think about assets that we're putting on the list, that we're thinking in that framework.
Mhm.
So there would be potential room there within that site for an actual facility to be added onto it, for it all to happen right there.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason I was so happy that the city was able to jump on it, because I think it's a central space, and it would have not been any recreation space. The other buyer was going to demolish the building and build some type of homes. So yeah, whatever we can fit on that, we wanna fit.
I have a quick question, because overseeing a building that is full of asbestos, it is like, I can't do anything to it. So I'm curious, like, how you're gonna address any additions or changes to that building and the mitigation, because the mitigation is crazy expensive.
Yep, so some of the asbestos, I believe, has been mitigated. The question is, is there asbestos in other parts of the building, right? So I think my concern are ceiling tiles. So the ceiling tiles in the auditorium have all been removed. The asbestos has been remediated in the auditorium. Have you been in the building? So there's a gymnasium, auditorium, kitchen, some other downstairs space, and then 3 rooms about this size upstairs. So my concern is the ceiling tiles. These ceiling tiles have been removed in the auditorium, so the asbestos has been remediated there. The only other concern with the asbestos is pipes. So if you repair a pipe and you have to cut it, if you don't touch it, then you're good. So I think that's, and then I don't think that, I shouldn't say I'm not concerned about the gymnasium, because the ceiling doesn't have acoustical tiles in it. But yeah, it's concerned. Yeah, I know if you touch it, you gotta deal with it. If you don't touch it, sometimes you can move it.
Yeah, because we've looked at it for our building to, like, if you could do an addition or something, and we had an architect look at it, and he's like, I don't want to live in the building.
What year was your building built?
71.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, it's definitely a concern, but
So without an inspection, on the building and the city moving forward to closing, it would be safe to say that regardless of what it looks like inside the building, the city will invest in that to rehab it.
Yep.
No matter what that looks like.
Yep.
There's no objection,
Well, no,
deadlines,
I
or
just,
any
yeah,
other
I just
things that
was,
you all are.
yeah, I just was, I guess for me, like, it's just sitting and listening to this conversation, right? Like, we invested money to put that, like, pavilion space in Ice Palace Park, to have some community space, and so, although it's not the county's purchase, it just gives me a little heartburn that, like, there's not any kind of documentation of deficiencies with the space.
Although that's not true. We have all the documentation that the owner has from his work on it, what he's done and what he's identified owning the building. The issue really is that we know we're buying a project. And so the question was, do we want to do this, or do we not want to have any opportunity for this to exist for the community? And so we know it may be a phased approach. It may be that we can only afford to remediate certain portions of the building and open it in phases as we get money. And so, you know, I have asks out already for money for this project. And there will be plenty of asks, and I have been greasing the wheels for this. So that, because they're gonna be big asks, it's gonna be, but the thing is if you don't buy the building, then there's no opportunity, right? That opportunity was gonna close, and there's no other building that was gonna be equivalent to this. So yeah, it may be a phased approach to open the building as we are able to get money, and maybe it's a while before we're even able to get money to open it at all.
Sure.
I would add, there's considerable documentation on the condition of the building. Short of inspection, we know what the heating system, what the issues with the heating system are. We know what the issues with the roof are, and we know what work has been done, which is considerable actually. And there's a whole asbestos report, and the report also documents what has already been done in terms of asbestos remediation. So we're not going into a blind. We have a pretty good idea of the condition of that building.
Sure, and then like, I guess in terms of like, and you can stop me if you feel like we're getting off track. I guess like in terms of programming, right, like, we offer leases on space for events like at the Sixth Street Gym or whatever that looks like. So like in terms of programming, then what's your next step with programming to make sure that it's not duplicative? Or that you're offering programming that is different than what our recreation department already offers? Or like, how do you go about tapping volunteers so that they're not?
Maybe we are.
I just, I'm just like, you know, I mean, I feel like the most appropriate way for us to move forward as a community is to have a collaborative approach, and this feels anything but. I mean, there's a lot of duplicative services that I think Lori mentioned that the county currently offers. We have the Sixth Street Gym, which offers this opportunity. Our rec staff has opened it for open gym space. We don't, we charge like $2 to come in there, do whatever you want on a Sunday afternoon from 12 to 6 or whatever that looks like. And so when I'm hearing these conversations, I'm just thinking about a missed opportunity with almost $1 million to invest in the things that are already offered here, so that we could focus on identifying a true rec facility and leveraging those partnerships, I guess, is just, for me, where my mind immediately goes.
Well, what it sounds like to me is, if there were an opportunity for a pool on that site anywhere, it would certainly not be a priority because you have this entire building to deal with, plus you have other people wanting in on any extra land space, so I just see a pool as a pretty big no.
So what I would offer right now, just,
I mean,
I hear you.
I don't think there's no to anything. I mean, I think that we just have to, if it fits the land and that's what people want, then we should do it.
So I think if we stop and we look around this room for a second and realize that you all showed up this morning, which means we are all driving the same boat already to some degree. And what I would offer is, there's some frustrations. We can't quell those. We've got to work through those frustrations. But also that today is about identifying locations and assets potentially. It is about starting to build a relationship that gets us rowing together, gets us moving together in this platform. And there's a lot of really good questions that need to be addressed. And I think I am encouraged by the fact that we're all sitting in this room together, which means that I think there is a path forward. And what I hear you saying, Lori, is there's no no's, there's no directions. You're not even sure right now how long it's going to take you to get the building up and functioning at this moment. And I think that's a critical component. And we're at the right moment to capture that and say, okay, how do we do this together? And is there a pathway that we do this together, which would be different, potentially, and exciting? So I want to just say that I think that the questions are really important.
Sure.
They're hugely important, and they might be a part of just a little bit later section.
No, that's fine. I just think that when we're talking about like moving forward towards what the community is wanting in terms of a recreation facility and a community center, and we're talking about potentially offering drop-in ancillary childcare, like the childcare partners are not at the table talking about this. And offering a space to have drop-in childcare that is compliant with state licensing requirements is like a whole nother monster in itself. And so I think before we're actually telling the community that this is gonna happen next winter, which it sounds like is the timeline, and we're talking about how do we get to the end goal, which is a facility that has a pool in it, these tough conversations have to happen first. Because if the city came to the county, and I'm only speaking as one commissioner, and you all can say how you feel, but if the city came to the county and said, we have potentially $1 million to invest in recreation assets, what would you like to do with it? I can think of a million things that I would love to do with it. I would absolutely put that towards the feasibility of a true community center that connects things in a location that is viable, that maybe doesn't have $1 million worth of renovations to go along with it. I could think about, capping the community field and putting a dome over the community field that we already have as an asset for our soccer programs. That we know we have a very short season to utilize that field, and that the cost of the replacement of the turf is almost $1 million in itself. So I could think of so many things that if the city said, hey, we have $1 million that we want to invest in recreation, how can we partner? That those conversations would have happened so fast, and that momentum and traction would have happened so fast to come to an end result. That's not a duplicative offering of programming or space or anything like that. That I just am so wholeheartedly disappointed in the missed opportunity. That's just my 2 cents. And I think before we can even have conversations about what we're all bringing to the table, I don't feel like in this position, I feel comfortable saying that we have a lot to bring to the table until other partners figure out like what they're gonna do, because I don't want to continue to invest in stressing this rec staff and our pros director in recreation programming if the city's gonna take that on, right? Like, why should the city offer recreation programming indoors if we're offering recreation programming indoors, right? Like, we shouldn't be duplicative with the limited amount of tax resources that we have. We should be leveraging that so that we can come to the end goal together. And it just, like, just for me, that's just kind of where I'm at in terms of like starting to have these conversations, which I think is where this has kind of spilled over with the school board bond measure, which I understand that the school board has taken the pool off the table, and so I am hopeful that they're able to push through and getting their facilities up to where they need to be for educational purposes. But before we can even have any of these conversations about like where are we gonna put a swimming pool, I think we have to understand like what everybody's gonna do with what they have.
I'm gonna actually back us up one step further.
Yeah.
Because I think what you're sharing, Kayla, what I'm hearing overall is distrust. Like, that we've gotta first maybe clear the air just a tiny bit. And so I wanna back up for a second, and this is gonna be a dive into a place where we're gonna have some limits on it, but I think let's clear the air a little bit.
Sure.
Because part of what I'm hearing in that, is that you just said it flat out. You are not ready to invest in something with this level of concern. And what I honestly hear is we've missed each other in some places. And if we are going to push forward towards some kind of collective collaborative effort, which I think we all to some degree want, maybe we need to back up for a second. And I've had the ability to have individual conversations with some of you and start to hear some of those pieces, but we haven't had them all in the room together. So, and I personally need to show up in the room with everybody and get the temperature of where we are. So here we are.
Yeah, totally.
And if you all will join me in this part, what I would say is would we all agree to take a pause here and just let's clear the air a bit and let's see what some of these, because if we do have any kind of distrust, communication questions, like how are we going to communicate about things? How are we going to share ideas? How are we going to move forward together? We can't just say we're going to row together. We actually have to understand. We all join me in that part. Is there any big problem with that piece? I don't see anybody willing to say yes or no right now, so.
Yes.
Yes. So let's back up and let's go for it.
No problem. Yes, I'll join you.
Yes.
And what I would say to this is, I think, let's find some regard for each other as we go through this process. But I think it can be a very valuable time to share some of the frustrations that we've held on to. And also to look at, what I don't want to do is get into a bitch session that goes on and on and on. But I do want to find what the frustrations are and then find the pathways forward. And my experience is we need to air the frustrations before we can find the solutions forward.
Sure.
So let's get really direct, kind,
No,
thoughtful,
it's fine.
but let's get really direct. Right back there, go for it.
And Adam Bay, I'm gonna speak and you can jump in if you would like. So Adam Bay and I have been having conversations about a joint, rec library center. We have been given the green light by Tim to do a feasibility study with CU Denver. And then all this comes in. And Adam and I are just like, I don't wanna speak for Adam, I will speak for myself. I'm just like, what is going on? I'm very confused. And then there's the, rec center with the city, where there was very little time to give any input, either as a citizen or as a county director who already has, is having conversations. So I think that's where my frustration is there's a lot of conversations going on. I mean, I think this is a step in the right direction, having everybody in the same room, but I'm real confused. So that's my complaint.
Fair.
I don't know if Adam feels the same way, because we've had several meetings. We're gonna have a meeting with Tim later this week, and so, yeah, that's my frustration. So we'll leave it there.
I think Adam unmuted if you wanna go to him next.
What was that?
I said Adam unmuted if we want to.
Okay.
Although I don't know if we can hear him.
We can't hear you, Adam.
Sorry. It could be part of our.
Can we hear anyone? The other Adam, can we hear you?
Yeah. Adam sometimes has issues with his mic. I don't know what. We've run into this before. He'll like.
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Oh,
Yes.
there we go.
I don't know, when it reset, I have to reset the audio every time Zoom starts on this. I'm not really sure why, and so when it had a little glitch there, it reset, and I didn't go back and do that. But I do want to follow up on what Brendan was saying, because yeah, we did get a green light from Tim to move forward on sort of a very slow and deliberate approach to figuring out what we want to do here. The library and prose departments is a natural fit, even within our county structure. It's kind of in the recreation and culture kind of group, or however we're setting those things up. It's a really natural fit. And we had been discussing about how to move forward, and the biggest question being, what is it that we're actually trying to do? What services, what are all those services that we want in a community center? Because I have a prose master plan and a 10-year visioning document where it's very clear that exploration of the potential for an aquatic center to be developed in the larger context of a community recreation center that meets a number of shared services for this community. That's always been pretty clear to me from day one, and it's laid out very clearly in both of those documents. So we started moving forward in a slow way with the CU Denver group, that I believe is the same group that the city is using on their site to kind of figure out feasibility for services they wish to provide there. And so there's an opportunity even to have that blended. So, we aren't going for duplicative efforts that Commissioner Marcella is talking about. Could be a good move there. I think, the pace amped up a little bit as the school district was bringing the bond measure forward. And so, we had multiple conversations, Tamara and I, and I think I saw Paul in the room there, Bethany and John, also from the school district, are online. We had a couple of sessions where we were talking through about what that could look like. And I was certainly encouraging a little bit of a slower approach and not trying to go to taxpayers to fund something that wasn't fully cooked yet. And, in this room, I'm hearing we're talking about locations and very specific things about restoration that would be needed at certain sites, but I don't really think we know what site we're even talking about doing that. I think that's a community outreach and engagement effort that is a couple steps down the road already. I think the first order of business is to figure out exactly what we want this place to look like. Is childcare going to be in there? Okay, well, Kayla raised a couple of big questions there in terms of licensing and the types of things we'll need to pay attention to even have that service available. Is that going to be feasible? Okay, we'll shop that out. We've heard Tamara say that EDC is could be willing to put resources towards a feasibility study for something like that. To me, that's the first order of business. And talking about sites and funding mechanisms, to me, those are all very deliberate community engagement pieces that need to happen in a planned way. And yeah, we can hash them out here, but without really understanding where the appetite is going to be for folks in this community, for the types of services, for the actual site location, for the ways these are going to be funded, and the way it's even going to be operated. I think those are all community questions that we actually have working models in Colorado counties and municipalities where this type of approach has worked. In Fruita, in Grand Junction, our neighbors to the south in Chaffee. I think we have a lot to learn about the processes we can start to move forward with. And the first order of business, again, is figuring out what and I were asked before she had gone off on vacation. And I think that's also, I apologize, Brenna, for coming back and now all of a sudden the room's gotten bigger, which I believe is necessary. But I think also taking some time to ask the questions in kind of the right order too before we get too far down the road, because talking about remodeling intermediate school, talking about putting something at Community Field or Huck Finn or the new city property, that I'm not sure that's the appropriate conversation for this time until we figure out what exactly we want this place to look like. And so that I just want to get back to Brenna's comments there that we started some momentum going in a very slow and deliberate way, and I have certainly pushed pause on that from recent events. And so I do appreciate Tamara setting up this work session and giving us the space to air these things out. But again, I feel like from a pros perspective and implementing the key points of the master plan, that type of approach would really just kind of 4 questions. What is it that we want? What's the feasibility around that across different jurisdictions? Where do we want the site to be? What is the actual funding mechanisms that are appropriate? DOLA comes in, grant money comes in. Do we go to taxpayers for some type of ballot measure? Maybe we don't. I'm assuming we would need something there. But once we have community buy-in as far as what that potential funding could be, then okay, move forward. And how are we going to actually operate this place? Who's the lead department in which jurisdiction to run that? So that's just a perspective from the pros.
So Adam, out of curiosity, or just sort of summing that up, like, is one of your frustrations, if a frustration or whatever language you would use, is that you have had a plan and you have had sort of a slow and methodical direction that you've wanted to go. And I think I'm hearing you note the duplicative efforts as well. Is that accurate?
I would say
Coordination.
frustration might be a little hard. I've just taken pause because I realize that a lot of people are have strong feelings about this.
In this room, no way.
Yeah. So, I mean, I would say I have an acute awareness that there are duplicative efforts. What all of them are, I mean, I don't know yet. And so I think that's what these sessions are for. That's what the original session that the city had several weeks ago when they voted on, to move forward on the site that was discussed earlier by Lori. And, those are good. Those kind of sessions are good to have, public discourse on that. And it's quite odd. We reached out to the school district and tried to, let Paul and Bethany and John and Felicia know that where we were headed and what we were thinking about, and trying to get rid of some of the assumptions about what we would and would not do, because I think there are some assumptions that we were planning to go 100%. We were going to go to voters next November. I don't think that was ever the case. We wanted to keep that open and get in stream. So we wanted to get things in place in good time before that time came up. And so I think things are moving in the relatively right direction with the discussions. So yeah, I just recognize that there are duplicative efforts, not sure what all of them are yet.
I think what I'm getting to is, since we sort of backed up a little bit, Adam, is, let's figure out what's gotten in our way so that we can have momentum and move forward. And so hearing from Kayla, gonna hear from Sarah shortly, and I think, in the room in general, like multiple things happening, and how come, confusion, right? What's this thing about now? I thought we had a plan going. And so how are we communicating all together? And I think what I'm trying to get to right now is, what are the core pieces that we want to create some alignment around that become our standards for how we operate as a group? And where have we missed each other in the past? And so your plan sounds amazing, Adam, and you and I have chatted about it at length, and I think it is a fantastic direction. And it sounds like we've got some things in the way before we get there about how we function together as a group. And communication being one of them, and how are we inclusively engaging everybody. So I just want to name that, and I'm hoping that I'm catching some of what you're saying, Adam, to the point of that you've been operating under one assumption, we've got other groups operating under other assumptions, and how do we bridge those pieces? Sarah.
Okay. I want to preempt this with, I started my direct local government public service at the city and was determined to come into my elected role here, combating this city-county competition. Because surely we can't really make progress if that is the mentality. Here I am 7 years later, with that mentality, like seeing this unfold before my eyes, and we're all
Still
in
there.
that place.
Mhm.
And I don't think we're still there, but I want to offer a few things that I don't blame anyone maybe for not understanding the perspective or the history, because I think we all fell across some discoveries and realizations as we are working and researching and going towards other projects and programs and priorities. But when say like there's no, like I get your kind of approach to that, like anything's on the table, anything's possible, great, but there has to be a no to set priorities. And I think our frustration at the county is that we knew we had to get our house in order and provide basic services at an exceptional level or accepted level, and hopefully exceed those expectations. And we're working to do that with a lot of planning that's taken years, with facility maintenance, with cost recovery. I know at one point the city was asked at Community Coffee if there was a revenue stream, and well, we probably won't charge, and I know that was maybe just an offhand comment and an opinion in the moment, but I mean, we are really struggling to make sure that we can get our house in order at the county so that we can say yes to so many other things, and we can move forward knowing that we have a plan to sustain whatever project or program, capital improvement, and before that, our basic services and our basic needs. So I think that there's a lot of frustration in discovering the history of the relationship with the city and county. Chris, I don't know if you can remind me the year that the county took over the library at some point.
Originally 19.
I was
Yeah,
looking at
60s,
Yeah,
so-
that's what I was trying to.
I mean, we have a history in the was it 70 that the first sales tax passed?
80.
I think it was 70, a
72 or
2%
something,
sales
yeah.
tax passed, and the county and city worked together. And the county said, yeah, if the city doesn't think they can pass the sales tax within the city, we'll do it. We'll give the city its sales tax that's collected in the city limits. So there's a first partnership. We took over the library. We've taken over a number of rec programming and or facilities for maintenance. We cost share fire department, animal shelter, and those conversations have really been frustrating, not actually being heard and saying, look, we can't just do all of these things, because here's a long list of things that the community expects from us, and we want to provide to them. And what the community wants and what we're able to provide aren't always gonna be the same thing, and we're working really hard to get there where we can do that, provide what the community asks for at an appropriate level. So there's a history of the county bailing the city out. This is nothing you're doing, Lori. There is also something I heard recently, that like, oh, this'll work because it's the Lake County Stone Soup method. You know, we pick up a project, we start it, and everybody works together. And while I love making a community meal and everybody sitting down with that really good, clear end goal, I think it's become irresponsible for our partners to bring something without an in-depth understanding of the rec programming that goes on, the cost recovery considerations that we are considering, you know, because we just can't give away things anymore. And we don't even know what's palatable really yet for the community to get appropriate cost recovery. Our overall facility planning, and maintenance really needs to be understood and a part of all of those plans. And then also when we talk about the revenue and the taxes, even we have to be really careful too about talking about a rec district, which to me means property taxes, because one, the city's property taxes are a small fraction of their actual revenue that they function on. And two, we've been talking about, you know, a sales tax, what's actually palatable to supplant something that the community will buy into. And so we can kind of adjust our budgets and general fund dollars to other areas. If we really need money for the Justice Center, but that's never gonna pass, let's look at all these other things that we currently provide and get some revenue for all these other services. And on top of that, I guess I'll just say too, like, you know, we've been talking and like clear partnerships with the city on housing, Justice Center for the sequence intercept mapping, and not just the building. Let's not think that Justice Center is just a building. It is a better process through the courts and through the legal and prevention systems for our community than just housing people in jail. It's so much more than that. We've been talking about housing. Even the wildfire, which we haven't asked anything for, is directly benefiting the city on WUI treatment right around the city. I mean, these are things that are listed in our hazard mitigation plans that have been in place for probably a decade, where we don't go back to these things and say, what are the priorities that we're trying to get to? And how have we're really terrible at looking back at like success and status, which is, I think that's just a challenge with our bandwidth. But I think it's really frustrating having these big things where we need millions of dollars for housing. We need millions of dollars for housing. And if you advocate for housing that it costs less and less for a consumer, then you better bring the money to fill that gap funding, which is very real, and or else we won't be able to build anything. So I think there's a lot of specifics, and I appreciate having to bring in with an agenda, but you also have people coming at it or from very different places in the conversation, and I think all of those things are just like infuriating at this point in
Yeah.
time. It is infuriating. And yeah, I would love to know how we better communicate all of this information and like the status of these things between each other.
So, anybody wanna add anything on communication right now?
I think for me, the only additional piece of communication is that it would have been really great to hear from our counterparts in terms of like city council or city leadership to say like, hey, we're thinking about this purchase, what does this look like? Is this something that you can get on board with? How does it further the goal of the pros planning? You know, before those things happen, like to Commissioner Mudge's point of, you know, the city-county partnership that seems to continue to erode by that lack of communication is just getting, the gap is getting further and further and further apart, right? Because I feel like if the city came to the table and said, hey, we have $1 million to put towards planning for a pool, what do you wanna do? That would get us further than where we are today, and I think purchasing that facility has put us backwards, where, again, the burden falls on the county to continue to have these conversations about, like, what's your next step? What are you gonna do to fund this pool? What are you gonna do to rehab the pool? Or build a new pool, or whatever that looks like, and so there just hasn't been any conversation around partnership of like, hey, we hear the school district talking about wanting to rehab the pool, and PB Swims has done a good job of you know, building a campaign for awareness and rehabilitation of the pool, and what do you bring to the table? And if the city came to the table and said we had $1 million for planning to get us to that point, Adam wouldn't have had to pause his work, you know, and it could get us to a point where we could eliminate facilities that are taking too much overhead operational costs and come to one facility that benefits a multiple array of community need. But I feel like we've kind of been robbed of that opportunity because we haven't had communication about what everybody's doing. So I think it just puts us farther behind when we continue to operate in a space where we have millions of dollars of investment into projects without communicating to one another about the end goal, right? I don't know if you have anything to add, Jeff, or if you wanna.
I don't need to pile on too much, and I agree with all that, and I think maybe just to add, I mean, something that weighs heavily on my mind is just, I mean, it's not millions, I mean, it's really hundreds of millions of dollars of like deferred, some deferred maintenance, but you know, just, I mean, the Justice Center is one, you know, big part, but you know, we're looking at 60 million, having already cut out things we identified as needed programming in that. So it's really, that's like a $70 to $80 million project. We have at least $40 million of housing subsidy gap, and that's not building stuff, that's just the subsidy gap for hundreds of units of, you know, meeting the gap between market rate and what local wages can support. You know, a couple hundred units of 100K to 300 to 400K subsidy gap, you know, and then you just go on and on, like, you know, 30 facilities in the PROS master plan, you know, the pool, you know, I mean, so we are an 8,000 person community looking at hundreds of millions of dollars of things we want. So that, I mean, yeah, just to sort of, you know, to pile on with one thing, like I find it frustrating that I don't think we really face up to the costs of things. Yeah, again, I'm all for plunging in and being scrappy and pulling together, but like that works for 100K or $1 million here and there, but that, you know, we can't tackle prioritizing and fundraising for, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars of stuff. And that's just sort of like the count, I mean, not just the county, but, you know, the school district has, you know, its own, you know, decade on decade needs to add another you know, tens of millions of dollars of stuff. So I guess, you know, just I think being really clear to ourselves and the community about the scale of the financial burden of keeping up with what we have, and, you know, all those parties. And I left out, you know, other, you know, there are other things on the list, like, you know, 10 years of wildfire mitigation, you know, childcare, you know, deficiencies in the community. It just sort of keeps going.
What happens with all that?
What
I guess,
happens with
yeah,
it all?
well, as you start to build that list, I just wonder what happens to our effectiveness. How do you wade through it? How do you prioritize?
I mean, that's sort of our jobs, right?
And I
You know,
think just
so-
that, like, how do we become
Yeah,
transparent
yeah.
about what that, how you handle that? Like,
Yeah,
I feel the weight of it, right? Anybody else feel it? Like, as soon as he starts to list all those things, it's like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
If you don't get mired, how would you not, right? So what is the process to move through it? And, I mean, there is something called a master plan, a comp plan, but, you know, that's supposed to guide that, but what happens with all that? I think right now is a moment to just be super transparent with each other and get to see that probably on all sides, there's a level of this happening.
I mean, I think it's tricky enough, even sort of looking at things that are clearly the county's individual responsibility. I mean, it's, you know, to give all of us a little grace, I mean, it planning that kind of multi-decade, multi-million-dollar planning is gonna be hard across different institutions. So, yeah.
Well, that's the other piece that you make me think of, Jeff. Planning for 5, 10, multi-decade priorities, which these are all really big projects to do. When we pull our people away from the basic things that they need to do day to day, and we keep throwing surprises or doing this, like, I don't think people appreciate how much of a strain that is on the organization as a whole and on individuals. And how many steps backwards we end up taking across the board on so many projects. I mean, little insights on planning. I think all of us are involved in planning, you know, our next 5 years, our next 10 years, and figuring out who, you know, what staff, who has what role, or what partners can provide that role where we don't have that capacity. Wildfire is a good example of that. Arwick State Forest Service, we have other partners who have those expertise, and we're doing our best to kind of tee that up and get a 5-year plan going. Fortunately, there's also tons of money coming from state and federal government to do that work, so the big question mark there isn't necessarily funding, it's just making sure that we can actually get it and be awarded that, and then just keep those on the ground initiatives and pieces moving. But that's how we're doing it. We're looking back, we're facility, you know, maintenance planning, we're cost recovery planning, we're planning where and who, what human these things are gonna live with.
So it took the better part of the last 10 months for the EDC. I would say, maybe Adam Descharme, you can chime in on how long it took. So we introduced this idea of collective impact. And for our board, how long did it take, Kayla, for us to actually grab a hold of the idea that this was a good plan moving forward, and actually what it meant?
At least 9 months, right? Because we talked about it in January.
Yeah.
So it's been like 9
Yeah.
months. Right?
Yeah, the only thing I was waiting for an appropriate moment, but the only thing I just want to offer to this conversation is this is pretty much exactly the type of conversation we should all be having. I know it feels really heavy, and I know that I was one of the people in the room that was the most reticent and the most rejective of the concept of collective impact, because it's scary and you have to do a lot of hard work to air your grievances, go to the metaphorical therapy that it takes to come together and get on the same page about this stuff, because the reality is none of us are anti-Leadville. There's not one of us in this conversation that doesn't all want us to succeed. It's just a matter of like working together and like rounding the corner and hearing each other and having really tough conversations and having really tough conversations, and staying invested. So I personally am very heartened by the fact that we are having this conversation, that everyone's here. And I do think that this work I really applaud Tamara for bringing this group together and continuing to bring this group together, because we do need to, on these types of conversations especially, we just need to keep talking through it and working through it. And I am somebody who, with the tourism office, I sit in the city and the county. I have these conversations. I'm very aware of the fact that this is multifaceted and that this is challenging and going to continue to be challenging. And then there's so much that the county takes on that the city's not dealing with, and vice versa. And there's so much to it. But I really appreciate this conversation, and I promise there is a forest from the trees thing that will happen if we just continue to work through this stuff. So
Yeah.
that's
And I throw
that's
that-
my blue sky takeaway.
Thanks, Adam. I throw that out there because we were one organization walking through this, and now how many organizations are represented in this room right now? So our process is a little muddy for this second, and what I'd like to do is hear some sides of PB Swims and kind of where you guys have been as well. I want to make sure we hear everybody today, because this is really how we got here. And the EDC is we had to air some things out, and we also had to learn what collective impact really could be. And it honestly, we had consistently about 8 to 10 people showing up at our strategy meetings, and it took probably till the last one where we're like, yep, we all get it, we're not going to do anything else, this is who we're going to be, and this is how we're going to move. And if it took one organization 9 months, imagine what it might take in this room. So I just say that to kind of hold a container of gentleness around this process a little bit, because this is not easy. And please share your frustrations, your concerns. Let's get them on the table and let's continue through this.
Yeah, for PB Swims, I'd like to say, with all the wants and needs that the county and city have, the pool just gets lower and lower on any priority list. Although we've been told we are a priority, there's just so many priorities. It only makes sense to renovate what we have at a fraction of the cost. We have been told anywhere between 4 million and 14 million. We cannot build a pool without an operating cost structure. So we try to get the operating cost structure set up. We've heard so many no's. Then we can't get the money to build the pool or renovate the pool without the operating structure in place. So we're in a catch-22. Obviously, a new aquatic center is at least a decade out. There's just too many other things in the way. And it's sitting there. So somewhere between 4 and 14 million, if we had an operating structure set up, we could go for grants. We were on a second tier of a grant for 3 million, but because we didn't have the money in place to operate, they backed out. So it's been very frustrating. The records show that the average annual total Lake County revenue from 2005 to 19, 51% was generated by the pool for the county rec. We showed just under 110,000 was the average annual cost to operate and maintain the pool, 2005 to 19. So it's not that much money, 100,000 a year. Salaries are 100,000 a year. So we just feel totally shot down, and we're not willing to wait another 10 years. We would like to see something start within a year or 2 max. It's been a very frustrating time.
Fair enough.
Tamara,
Yes?
this is Wendy, if I may.
Yep.
Yeah, so I agree with what Linda was saying. I'm the vice chair of PB Swims. I would like to take a slightly different look at it in that I'm on the subcommittee for fundraising. And so I spend a lot of time in the community, and overwhelmingly here, pool is our top priority. Why is it taking so long? I would like to say that in my brief tenure here, I've been here 3 years. It's been frustrating to see the silos of the various government organizations in Leadville. And so I'm very appreciative of this meeting. PB Swims has been going to city councils, BOCC, school board district meetings, wherever we feel like we can speak, we've been going. But the message from the community is it's so apparent, the discord between the government. That's really frustrating to me. So I'm appreciative of this meeting, Tamara, and that you met with us last week and heard some of our frustrations firsthand. So I appreciate this meeting, but we have got to work together. This is just, it's mind blowing to me when I walk among the people and they're like, well, the BOCC, blah, 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 and the city council, and we just need to pull together. I don't think it's this hard, frankly.
Thanks, Wendy.
And now with the pool not being part of the bond that the school board is being put out, or is being put out by the school board, we have heard on the street that there's no pool. We have a big fundraiser coming up in less than a month, and people have said, well, it should just be canceled because there is no momentum for a pool amongst the government entities. And any grants that we put out there or apply for, they see no governmental support. So we're shut down before we can even start. We have nowhere to turn at this point. So we're just gonna keep doing our little fundraisers, which are not in the millions, and look for a way to back up our operations funds.
Yeah, we're not giving up. So
Yeah.
let's work together and make it happen.
Elaine?
Who was it that had the little quotation up there on the board right at the beginning of the meeting about Leadville having champagne taste and a beer budget? Is precisely the problem. I mean, it's no problem, a vision of what we'd like to have. That's not a problem. That's just unreal. It's just unrealistic, in my opinion. And I don't know when it could happen. So you said something that intrigued me a while ago about working with developers. And I guess I'd like to hear you talk a little more about what that means. Are we talking about the people that are coming in to build these subdivisions of homes that are not affordable? Can we upfront tell them, yeah, maybe we'll let you do this if you give us this, and this? Is that what you're talking about? I don't know.
Well, I would say, Elaine, let's probably come back to that a bit later, but yeah, I think we have some ability to have discussions with some of the folks that we're working with, but I'd love to keep right now, I want to go into that, I don't want to avoid that question, but what I don't want to do is get off.
If you'll address that later, that's great.
Absolutely.
Okay, and I would just say that my overall frustration is that the same as they have voiced in that we're trying to find a way, and every time we think we may have a way, it's no, that won't work, no, that won't work, and it's not, well, let's see what we can do, it's just no.
Yeah, that's what we've got.
And so I'm gonna voice my appreciation for your efforts here, very, very much.
We had engineers look at the school. They said there's about 30 years of life remaining in the school generally. So a renovation project is not a pipe dream. We're not being silly about this. We are being very realistic that a renovation is the way to go. And we'd like to feel some support behind us for that, so that we can have a pool sooner than later. So kids can have swim balls and so seniors have a place to go, for all the reasons that we need a pool to be a complete community. We have talked many times, but not really been heard, we felt, that PB Swims would run the pool as a board, the same way the ski hill and golf course are being run. And I know there seems to be some objections to that. There's some people feeling that they're not being run well, but I've seen nothing but improvements in the last handful of years on both of those. And they're being run very successfully. There's no problems, there's no infighting, they are being put out there for the public use, and they are succeeding. And we can succeed in the same way.
Still some communication stuff in there, huh? Not being heard, not being
Absolutely.
and silo stuff. Okay, thank you. How about the school district? Anybody,
I guess
Paul,
I can
John?
Start, I don't speak for the school board, so if John, Bethany, superintendent, or Alicia wanna speak up after. I guess I've been involved with the rec board, was on it for 8 years, really started identifying that the aquatic center wasn't gonna last forever, and getting that initial assessment done. And, it identified cast iron pipes that are just dissolving in the building, same thing that the intermediate school is currently, and I think it's kind of, some of that's taken as deferred maintenance that just wasn't done. Well, you don't really do maintenance on a cast iron sewer line annually to keep it up, as far as I don't know of any of that. It's like, these systems are at the end of their life needing replaced, so similar to what that basic level of remodel that will be on the bond this year is addressing those, it's necessary things that are just reaching end of life. So, I think the current pool is, if we're really addressing possible options, I think it's still on the table as far as I know. School has no intent to do anything else with that space for now. Should be part of this discussion going forward is, I think the limitations are there. There is a updated assessment. Councilman Hunsaker, the same firm that did the original assessment, have been back in this summer and kind of updated some of those things. So there is current reports of that site. I think it's very limited to kind of what as it sits right now. And I think for me, that would be the question. Does that meet the community's need? As far as the school district had a master plan in 2019. If that intermediate school was ever to be abandoned as an education facility, the community was really allowed to put some comments out to what they would like to see, and really that community center concept was identified in that master plan as a potential option. And I think it would be a huge advantage to have a senior center next to your aquatic center with the library, all these things similar to Fruta, that just brings the community together. And with that, I guess I want to thank the EDC for bringing all of these stakeholders together, because it's going to take all of us to determine and move forward with whatever the best plan is moving forward. And it is very much an EDC topic, and this makes Leadville a place that people want to move, want to live, raise their kids, and then even stay into retirement if health allows. Like some people just get to a point where they can't handle the altitude. Nothing we can do about that. But really, these are long-term, major master planning decisions that need serious thought, and with some focused effort, I think we can really make Leadville much more desirable community to live. We have great movement going on housing, so I think that's being taken care of. Child Care Coalition is really addressing some of those needs. Through the elementary school build, we were able to add 2 classrooms that we just don't have staffing for right now, but there is current capacity to add 2 more classrooms if the students and staffing come along. So many things are really coming together, and I guess I would commend the city on moving forward with a housing funding mechanism to get some funding going with the short-term rental, as well as acquiring the new space. To me, those 18 city lots, the location, vacant land alone exceeds the value of what was paid. Ideally, some of that facility can be just renovated rather than complete demo and used, because as we know, there's just a way more need as far as kids, just space, community, teen center, and all the things. So I think I've heard just different discussions in the community and at meetings of frustration about, there should have been a lot more talk on that. And I guess to me, I want to recognize the city for being folks that are stepping up and moving on some issues that I think need addressed, and not necessarily, doing their own thing, but, it needs to be a community-wide. I support the communication discussions that have been happening today, but the fact that can be a site that's considered for an aquatic center with a community center next to Ice Palace Park, and, it's just making that location in the community kind of center to a lot of the housing right on the Mineral Belt Trail, parking. There's a lot of really good points to that location. So if the intermediate school pool isn't pursued, this I think is a great option to at least consider, along with, say, community field and some of the other known recreation sites. But ultimately, with the master plan, rec master plan, I think it kind of helped identify we need an Adam, we need a pros director, a much bigger scope. That alone is a huge step that the county has taken just in this past year or two, and just enabling all of us to move forward with a much more defined, well thought out plan, and be in a position to put in for the grants that are ultimately going to fund, because none of us are sitting here with open checkbook ready to write, able to write the check.
You didn't bring your checkbook, Paul?
I'm willing, I'm just not able, so. So that's where we need to be, is in a position to qualify for the grants when they become available. And I think this process is a huge step, and it's timely that now with the school really stepping away from having the pool as part of their initiative, that the process really needs to focus effort to keep it moving forward. Like, we don't want it to stall out. There is a need, and I really, I think for me, it's having the commissioners at all of these discussions. I think this is the perfect venue to hold the conversation, so that at a point, we're ready to go to a ballot with any sort of question. Those 3 seats are the ones that really have to be on board, or it just stalls out again. If all of us but them are part of this conversation, we get to a point where we want to put something on the ballot, they're not bought in, we've done nobody any good. It's a waste of everybody's time. So
it takes all of us for sure, doesn't it?
Yep.
And ultimately, any grant funding that we want to go after is much more secure and potential with this group all working together at it. I mean, you show up as a collective, and they see that the whole community and the whole business, city, county is behind it. The funding is much more imminent in that situation. So, but I want to get back to John, Bethany, Felicia. What about from you all, and concerns? Let's make sure we air these things out right now and get them on the table.
Yeah, I'll be quick. I won't repeat everything Paul said there, but the important parts. We were coming out for the community, but really the pool and a recreation center is in the scope of the county or city, and not really the school district. We're the fact that it's in our building brought it into our realm. So when we were talking about it and had the county come out so strongly and say, hey, we're working on this thing and we want to do this as a community, that was a good sign for us that, hey, maybe this isn't the way we need to pursue right now if the county is going to be coming after this. So, and it needs to be a coordinated effort. But like Paul said, it's not like we have now decided, oh, we're going to do something else with the pool. That hasn't happened. So if something came back, I would say it's definitely not off the table right now. But communication definitely is needed, for all the entities that are trying to get these things done. It was, like I said, we worked on this for a long time, and then we heard at the very end, wait, the county's going to work on this too. And so communication earlier would have been great. So we just want to keep the communication open. So thanks for facilitating this portion of this discussion and the discussion in general, I guess. So.
Bethany or Felicia, anything you guys want to give? Bethany?
I think it's been covered really well by both Paul and John. I would echo, that we want to continue to, be a partner, whatever that looks like moving forward with some ongoing conversations, and, happy that these group conversations are happening, and just looking forward to more of them.
Excellent. What are we missing in the room that hasn't necessarily? I want to come back to the city, maybe Lori, for a second, and just in the specific realm of getting into the concerns about how we start to kind of move in a collective, and just pieces from your side of what you've experienced in your shorter tenure, but that brings some fresh eyes to it too. Just anything you want to add to this specific part of the conversation?
Yeah, I mean, I think I definitely heard the concerns about greater communication, and so, just to address that one particular issue with the community center is that it was not how I wanted it to roll out. I needed more time to figure out that project. I did not have more time. The problem was, as the idea was coming up and we were working on it, the property owner got another offer. That's exact, and so the opportunity and the need crossed at the same time. We had preliminary meetings with some people in sort of a high 10,000 foot level of, what is the need, and, Roxy's class brought the idea to us a year ago. And that was their project, and said, this is a need. And so, I think in a perfect world, I would have had 2 more months to have all the meetings with everybody to get the input. I got a text message on Thursday night that said the owner had an offer and he had to decide by Monday morning. So that was it. And I'll tell you, if it was not that building, it was not going to be a project in my lifetime here, because, it was an opportunity and a need that came at the same time. So absolutely hear that there needs to be better communication, and that wasn't ideal. And I know that wasn't an ideal situation, because I think a lot of people didn't get the opportunity to tell us in the city. But I think one thing that I have, sometimes government moves slowly and sometimes it moves quickly. And I think there's a balance. And I do think that the city has tried to be more nimble with ideas and trying things. And I understand the county, I hear you, that we don't have a fully ironed out master plan for the community center, but we have a building. And if we hadn't done anything, we wouldn't have a building. So there's no need to have a plan if you have nowhere to put the ideas. So I think that given the choices, I think I'm proud of the city for acting, and now we can develop a plan. And I guess what I'm saying is I hear Adam loud and clear that, he wants to be thoughtful and slow, and I don't think, there is no urgent need to rush a project. And I think what I've heard from the beginning, loud and clear, is the community needs a pool. And the issue is that if that building had a pool in it, that would have been a no-brainer. But I also think that there are other needs that the community has as well, and I think it's important to figure out like what is the priority. And I think, hearing PB Swim's comment, everything, I do think it needs a dedicated income stream or it's never gonna get off the ground. And so I think that is personally why I think there needs to be some type of a recreation tax. I don't think it should be a property tax. I think it should be a sales tax. I think it should be a tax that goes to a number of buckets, and one of those buckets being a pool. Because otherwise, I don't think a pool is ever going to get off the ground. And I'm willing to be supportive of that and do whatever I can to support that, because I think that that's what do they call it, a tide that lifts all boats. I think it's something that can benefit, because I do think there are a number of needs, and I think I've heard loud and clear a pool is one of them.
Well, thank you. We do need our own bucket. And we did try to put a sales tax on the ballot, and we got turned down twice. And we are in the process of becoming a 501(c)(3). C3, sorry, I keep doing that. And perhaps that will be our way to approach getting a sales tax. We need a confirmed revenue stream, or we can't get the money to build the pool, whichever way that happens, or renovate the pool, because we don't want to wait for our priority to come to the top of the list between all the things that need to be done in the county.
But that revenue stream is probably going to require either city or county approval.
Exactly.
It's not, I'm not certain yet, but it looks to me like even with the requisite signatures all approved and whatever, it may still require some governmental approval at one level or another. And if we have to share the money with other entities, then the obvious thing would have to be a county tax to maximize the effect of the tax and take advantage of all the tourists that spend so much time here in 2 seasons at least. But that's been our difficulty.
Yeah, if I could jump into that for just a second, and my inclination is to take a 5-minute break, everybody go to the bathroom, get a drink of water, at least I want to. And what I'd like to do, given where we ended today, or where we've come to today, I'd like to come back with a couple of suggestions on how we're going to address our communication piece and do it differently moving forward. But I don't want to stop that conversation, I just want to put it at the right moment. And I feel like that is an Adam Bay thing a little bit, and I want to get with Adam. And Adam, are you still on there, able to hear me? As we get into, you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
I want to make sure, I feel like this is in your neck of the woods, Adam, and I want to work with you on this piece. But I think if we can get the foundation of how we're going to work together in place and get some buy-in around that piece, and then we can move forward from there. And come back and look at what Adam has put in place, and let's talk through some of those pieces. But I would like to take a 5-minute break if we're all good with that. Come back, and then let's come back with some ideas on how we're going to bridge this communication and start to shift it. I think we are hearing the same things across the board from all of us. And what I just heard, what's funny is if you sit here and you just sit back and listen, every single one of us jumps to a solution, because we are people who want to solve this issue. Everybody in this room wants to get this addressed. There's a lot of leadership in this room, and a lot of momentum and energy, a lot of capacity. So if we can figure out that piece of bridging it and getting it moving in the right direction, and a format that works with the county and the priorities there, the city and the priorities there, we've got a community center that we can jump in and potentially help work with the city on. We've got Pros and Adam working on this piece already. There's ways that we can come together in this. So let's first tackle this communication piece, and what are you bringing to the table about how we address it and change it? I'm going to the bathroom.
Yeah.
We've been through it, we've been through lots
Oh,
of
you
great.
want this?
um,
Yeah,
intro
sorry.
moments. Sure.
Okay.
All right, so this is where we collectively,
Shoot, I didn't go there.
I'll be right, lay out some ideas, some forward motion on how do we address this communication thing. We've all nailed it, we've all said it in one way or another. This has been the ongoing thing. People don't feel heard, they don't feel seen. They don't know this is going on, they don't know that's going on. And what I take away from every conversation I have in here and outside of here independently is I have yet to see a malicious intention. But I've seen a lot of independent, strong humans. Hey, I don't think this is gonna get done, we're gonna go get it done. And how do we bridge the communication? We are so much stronger together. We will find the answer to this rec center, the pool, all of it. Justice Center even, I think. But what are some ideas on how I want to brainstorm for a few minutes and just, let's get some buy-in around how we're gonna change the communication in a way that addresses what everybody's feeling. And I will be quiet as long as I have to, don't you worry. So do we have another piece of paper? I can start to write ideas up here.
Yeah.
Here's Peyton, you want to pass?
Or you get, let's see, no, I'll put one of these up there. How do we fix it, yo? I think that maybe it's not even fixed, but what are the next steps towards, because y'all are sitting right here, and to me, this is huge. We're in the same room, and we're gonna figure out who else we need to bring to the room, and we're gonna continue to put a minimum on that. What else? What are ideas, standards? What feels important about how we do this process moving forward?
I think for me, continuing this format with as many stakeholders all in the same room, that it's not take it and then report back 8 months from now. And certain folks are just completely out of the loop of what conversations have happened between now and then.
Cool. I vote yes on that too.
I got one for that. Two for that. What else?
I've had a thought on, though the county is statutorily required, well, and not necessarily statutorily required to provide all the services we do provide, I do think it should be more of it should definitely be a city-county responsibility to provide or understand those services and connect our constituents and our community with those services. Because though the city doesn't have to provide human services, in the department, they should understand what all those programs are. And I think that might be missing in maybe some level of satisfaction in like serving for the city perhaps. And clearly, you sit here in this seat, it takes 4 years to figure that out across the county. So I wonder if even just kind of standing reports or showing to council meetings to get department faces in front of folks and get a familiarity, so there's a better chance that people can connect in a way. Just seems like a good idea. And all of our, when we have these conversations, they're all, we should organize them together, making sure that we can all be here together, but they are also all had really publicly. And that's a little important thing to remember, like time is stretched.
Time is stretched. But, boil that down. What do you want me to put up there? Because I'm hearing a couple different things. I'm hearing how the city and county are collaborative in some of their efforts and understanding of each other's purviews.
Maybe like holding places in currently occurring meetings or spaces for each organization to show up and routinely.
Like with the standing meetings and stuff like that.
Standing agenda items or report or community informational
Yes.
items.
Well, I have like
Go
an
ahead.
action item to get that to work. So I think that the Lifetime, the race series was a good example of sometimes how we just need to have a meeting to get everybody to the table. So we had meetings that pulled everybody together. And what I realized is we don't have that, and so maybe we have meetings where because I'm sure you get department reports, we get department reports. Maybe we have our departments have inter-department meetings, and then they can report up to the city council in their department reports, like, hey, we met at the county and this is what's going on, like a 2-sentence thing where instead of having everybody sit through an hour-long meeting, those departments just meet together. So like road and bridge and streets have a standing meeting. And then they can report up, so Tony, when he comes to his department report once a month, can say, hey, this is what road and bridge is doing, or this is what information needs to filter up to everybody from that level, instead of, because then they can get into the weeds on the things they need to get in the weeds on, but then filter up just the key things, like.
I totally hear what you're saying, and I also think
No,
through my
right.
experience, I think it's really important for the elected officials to have some like face time to understand and have that dialogue if it's not already happening elsewhere. And we have built, added to professional development and encouraged folks to continue to have that responsibility to do that reporting at a level that is requested, and it's just often not really I don't know, I feel like it's challenging to get there sometimes with bringing the information that is
Where's the miss? Like, where is the
consolidated by
actual
one
miss
person.
here in terms of, like, at one point in my head, I was thinking city, county managers, and a specific crew at that level is definitely meeting regularly. That was something in my brain, right? But what I don't know, so without putting that out there, where is the miss happening? Where are we not? Like, how much does he know about Adam's work that he's doing on the rec center?
We did not know he existed until he showed up to the council meeting when we were purchasing the community center.
Okay, and when did you guys learn about the community center, whatever it's gonna be, right? So-
We learned about it through a third-party communication that had been sent out by a community member to county director staff. And we were not, at least myself, was not directly communicated with from any leadership at the city about that conversation happening.
And what I'm getting at is, I don't know that's intentional, but what's the miss? Where is that gap that we can fill and change? And just, even, we might have to try 5 different ways to do this until we find the one that we can actually accomplish. Because we all know that everybody in this room ends up in multiple meetings all day long, all week long, and it gets hard to add any more, but where's the miss happening and how do we change it?
Well, I
Shouldn't
think
the county manager and the city manager be meeting or communicating at least weekly, if not monthly, if not weekly? I mean, they're the management.
Yes,
They should be aware of what each other, with each other, what's going on in the other zones. 'Cause boy, the disconnect is huge.
And I'll speak for Tim, like for me, I know for Tim and I, we had a standing meeting when we first started in the middle of the day, which never happened because our schedules were so full of meetings, so we couldn't actually meet during the day. So then we started meeting at night. And then we also have all kinds of meetings every night. And so I guess what that comes down to is, yeah, absolutely, in a perfect world. But I think I don't know about Tim's schedule, but sometimes my meetings start at 8 AM and do not finish until 5 PM. So to have 2 more hours of straight meetings, and I think, Tim and I have tried to make it social to meet and to get on the same page. I think we need, I actually had somebody tell me the other day that really, I don't have time, like, you need to just dial back the meetings. But it's very hard to dial back the meetings, especially, so that was my suggestion in part, like, trying to filter the information from some of our, like, just the departments, like, having them communicate and having Tim and I communicate. But I don't need to sit through every single meeting that happens between Road and Bridge and Streets. I think that can happen and that information can get filtered out. But I do think like the communication at the higher level, we need to work on that too.
What about
Email
this?
recaps, I mean.
Lori, what about this? I would propose actually that the EDC, the city and the county meet regularly. And then we have a standing meeting, and then that becomes a regular cadence where we are connecting on different priorities that we're working on.
Like you and Tim and Lori, you mean? Because I think that there's also a piece of that where,
It might be somebody else's name too, but.
yeah, I think that, or like your EDC representatives, maybe. But I think there's also a part of that too, where, like for us, this is a full-time gig, and for city council, maybe not so much. That the responsibility seems less day-to-day heavy, I guess. But for me, like the fiscal responsibility of city council isn't any less. And so I think really just having that opportunity to be in the room with city council, and it may be that it needs to be a work session every other week, or it may be that it needs to be a work session every week, going into budget season, because where you're putting your money is where you're putting your resources, and you're driving the implementation of the policies that we as decision makers create, and Tim is carrying out that implementation with our staff, right? So if it is the feasibility study, we're putting our resources into the feasibility study, and Tim is implementing that with our staff. And so maybe if there's just an opportunity for us to have those work sessions and that open forum with city council more frequently of like, here's the county's budget, here's where we're putting our money, here's where each department's long-term plans are, and how they align with our action initiatives. That might be a way to start, because I think we get siloed frequently, and then all of a sudden we have conversations when it comes to budget time because we need money for transportation, or we need money for the fire department, or we need money for childcare, or whatever that might be. And so there's not a lot of conversation or information conveyed to leadership that's implementing those across organizations, because the lead on those projects may not live in the city. And so I think there needs to be some more communication amongst leadership between the city and the county in terms of elected officials, because we set the budget and align the resources with what we are anticipating completing.
So you're saying a city council VOCC work session?
Yeah, more frequently than not, I would say.
What has been the frequency of that in the past?
Minimal?
Yeah, or,
I don't know.
or maybe, I mean, yeah, not all three of us and all of city council. I think what happens is sometimes like one of us on a whether it's like housing or transit or the Justice Center will come on that topic and, you know, go to a city council meeting.
Let me throw it out this way. What I really took away from the first hour and a half is what has happened over time, these siloed communications and projects has created distrust, ultimately. And how do we mend trust? Like, that is gonna take some work and prioritization of us saying, okay, in order to get to a place where we effectively trust all of what we're doing together, we're probably gonna have to put in a little bit more effort on this side and maybe prioritize that over some other things. We are hearing very clearly that communication is the issue, and that we need a map forward that not only the leadership can trust, but the community can trust. We're hearing the community say the same things, that there's a disconnect between the city and county. It doesn't matter what pocket you go into, you'll hear that conversation. If we want to change that and gain trust, we've got to prioritize this. So I would suggest potentially that it's heavier on the front end, and as we start to build that, we can start to back off, but to realign, that we do decide on a mechanism forward, and maybe there's a couple of them. There is a BOCC City Council regular work session, and then a leadership, or not necessarily leadership, but certain positions that are meeting regularly as well. Thoughts?
I'm gonna just say, work sessions, we don't have the staff the county does. I can't have my staff meet every 2 weeks, I can't, they'll quit. So, and we are going to probably meet every 2 weeks until the end of the year, we had a work session on some code changes, we got a work session on short-term rentals, we're gonna have work sessions on our budget. I don't have the staff to meet every 2 weeks, and so I appreciate that the county understands that the city council operates as, most of our city council members have full-time commitments outside of being city council members. So the work that you do falls to staff. So, when someone says, can the city do X? That's my day. The city is basically like, 4 people. And so to have a work session, just for purposes of catching up, what I would suggest is, I try and have one-on-ones with my city council members as much as they will let me. So, we brought up the idea of having subcommittees work on things, and perhaps we can create some subcommittees where, county commissioners work with the city council members one-on-one on topics like transit. Right, so you create that communication, you're like, oh, by the way, we're doing this transit thing, but there's this other thing we're working on, and we work the communication that way, because having a formal work session, like a standing work session where you just catch up on things, is gonna kill my staff.
Yeah, and I guess just to that point, like, what, I guess for us, that'd be helpful to know what your staffing pattern is looking like going into 2024. Because I would imagine now that we're coming into this space, and this is just some food for thought to take away from this conversation, is like, now that we're going into this space where you've got this facility and you're going through, like, let's figure out what it looks like, what is the staffing pattern to do that? So that, the same goes to us, right? Like, we don't have the bandwidth or capacity to take on city projects, so like, what is the staffing pattern for us to create that collaborative communication? So do you have a plan to increase staff at the city to help you with those backlogs and holes that like these new purchases are creating, or are you gonna delegate a city council member to work with Adam Bay to understand programming? Like, what is the next step?
So for every position that the city creates, I need to go to city council to create it. And so I've done that. I need to be very careful about how often I go to the well to do that. We've all seen the political cartoons and the pushback when government expands. And so I want to expand very carefully and thoughtfully. And I had a plan for the positions that I wanted to create. And so my biggest issue is filling the current positions that we have. We're a small community, we have a small amount of talent. And so it seems like it's always a constant, just trying to, frankly, we talk about priorities. My priority was getting payroll last week. Okay, and I understand that there's lots of other things that, people are saying, why isn't this getting done, and when? I just wanted to get, last week, people paid. And so I'm like, sometimes we're back to the basics, and I've been here for 1.5 years, and so sometimes I feel like I make a little progress forward, and then the next week, I'm like, can we even have somebody write some checks? So that's kind of how I feel like I've been in triage since I got to the city. When I got to City Hall, there were 3 people running the city. The mayor, an administrative assistant, and a finance director. That's bananas. That's crazy. So building up is gonna take some time. So yes, there is a plan to add, but I need to be careful about the tasks.
What's doable right now, Lori? So, I hear short-staffed is hard. Like, how much more can you put in there? How much more can you ask of people? And what can we do? Let's talk about where we can connect, and like, this issue is not gonna go away, and it hasn't gone away. So what is possible right now? Is it, who do you have that you would send to a work session? Like, if these guys, if we were gonna do some kind of city county work session that was somewhat regular, who would you send? Just, if you could, who would you send?
Well, that's too vague. I need to know what the purpose of the work session is, and are we talking one city council member? You want the whole city council, or do you want council and staff?
What would you like?
Well, I don't think that that's up to us to determine, right? Because to Commissioner Mudge's point, it's not our house to get in order. Right? But like, we need to be able to like progress these projects, but if there's not city representation to come to the table to participate, it just puts us further and further behind, right? So if you can't come to the table to talk about transit, who do you assign to that? I guess is the question. Like, that's just an example, but like, if you don't have the staff to do that, how do you create the space to have the staff to do that? Because I think we're moving towards a direction of like, there's more and more and more things coming up that we need to comply with. So how do we continue to have that partnership to comply with it if you don't have the staffing capacity to do that?
I'm a little bit confused. I thought we were talking initially about kind of a high-level check-in between city and county, and I fully support that idea. I appreciate what Lori said. I don't think the city has the staff to, have a big work session every other week or whatever. But the city gets staff reports, as I'm sure the county commissioners get staff reports. And I think it might be useful at a high level to start with something that basic. And then as bigger issues come up, in those meetings between city and county, city council members, to the extent that they can attend, county commissioners, then you look at staffing those issues and choose a path forward for how we move ahead. And this is just high level, and I'd love for us to talk about the pool, the rec center, that's what we came to talk about today.
Right.
And I think it's gonna be all hands on deck for the next year if we have any hope of putting forward a ballot measure, for example. So I think one thing we should think about right now is what small group of people needs to start talking about that. I certainly appreciate continuing the collective meetings because I think that's important, but it's hard to get a lot done in groupthink. If we had,
we can change that, don't worry.
Yeah, if we had a rep or two from city, from county, from PV Swims, maybe from the school, to start to work this issue really hard, and I think that's what needs to happen to move forward in 2024. Those are my initial thoughts.
The biggest problem with the county's rec pros department is there's not a city rec pros department to meet with. And then we get bombarded with, hey, we just purchased this, we might have an indoor soccer field or indoor this or this that, we're gonna provide. And right now, we are providing, well, not all of it, but some of the, like, team sports, I would say. But like the Wheelers have their thing, and we don't try to overtake that. We would like to work with them, but there has to be that communication, but there's nobody really at the city in that position for us to meet with, but then all of a sudden, we have this building that we're gonna do this with, and we are kind of in this position that, well, are they taking our programs? What are they?
Yeah, I guess that articulates kind of like the point I was getting at is, like, if we're moving forward with our programming and then all of a sudden you have this big project, who do we communicate with on that project to move it forward collaboratively?
So what I wonder, I'm gonna go back to what I said, I wonder for in the short term, if the three of us meet, and the reason I say that is because I think the EDC can perhaps play a role in helping facilitate some of the gaps, or that's something I need to sit with our board with, but I do think getting a high level regular meeting going is a potential option that we start to, and then we keep the collective meeting moving. So whether it's a couple of representatives, which I appreciate, allowing all those humans who want to show up, but ensuring that we are represented with each of those stakeholders. And I get that we are all strapped with priorities and time, but I think part of this meeting, what I'm understanding, Lori and Tim, and I'm asking this question, and I'm asking the group also, but is that an opportunity then to cover off on regular things that we can go, hey, wait, we do need to get this on the discussion over here, we need to get this to this meeting over here, and to make sure that there's a regular forum for the delivery of what's happening between city and county to start with, particularly while you're understaffed in this moment. So thoughts about that?
Another meeting, sure.
I understand it's adding, but it's also, we've got an issue that we want to address, right? And how do we do that? What would you be able to, from the city side? Part of what we're trying to get away from is how things happen, and we need a bridge between the city and the county for that to happen, for that communication to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think I like a lot of the ideas that have been presented, and I think, I do think we were talking specifically at this last city council meeting about subcommittees, because I want to take on everything, and I think the meetings are important and they're great. I physically cannot do all of that, so I do want to try and tap some of the city council, and when they're willing to step up. And I do think it's important to start the conversation going about, the collaboration on what, the purpose of this meeting was, the rec center and the pool, like what
We're
conversations.
gonna come back to
we
that,
need
but if we don't, like, we've discovered that the core of what has been maybe the challenge is this issue. And if we keep it in the closet over here and we don't address it, then we don't fix the path moving forward. So we're just trying to find one step. All we need is one step around this today, I think. And the first one's been made because we showed up here. Now the next one is, how do we show up again? And what is that? And if it's, maybe it is Rebecca, maybe it's somebody else is the representative, but how do we bridge this piece so that we address those holes and gaps and we have communication flowing freely between both?
I love meetings, Lori, sign me up.
Yeah, okay. Well, but I think that's dividing and conquering too. I mean, I
Totally.
think there are certain meetings that have to happen and they're essential, and I agree. And then there's other things that where people are volunteering, like because, Commissioner Marcella brought up the transit thing. Absolutely. My plan on that would be, I would love to find out of which, city council members are interested in that and would be the point person on that. And so that's when I was saying, we're talking about the work sessions. I was like, great, let's just pick the topics. And then, because you said, who'd you send? I don't know. Because if it's the topic that someone is interested in versus, you're gonna be, because I have some city council members that have a ton of time to be engaged, and some that don't have a ton of time to be engaged, and some things they care about, and some topics that they don't really know much about at all. So I picked the person who has the time and the interest. So, you'll see, like in my city administrator's report, I'll say, we're gonna do this. Can we pin down a date for this? And who's interested in this? Can I get a volunteer to do this? So, maybe that's the way to go forward, is to have the high level meetings, but also for particular issues. We say, okay, we need to have a point person with the city and the city council on this topic. Can we get that person to be that point person as well?
I think the tricky part, because I just had your city council person effectively resign from the EDC. So what we see is a trend, right, where I think that's the idea. That's where we want to get to, right? What are the steps we take to get back there, so that we have people not spread so thin that they can't do it, that they can't accomplish it.
And that's the thing, is like, the city council member runs a business, so there's oftentimes conflicts in time, and so that's the other thing too. It's the interest and the time to do it.
So maybe in this moment, to keep us moving and get kind of back to rec center, specifically community center and those pieces, the step forward here is some form of overlap where we're having, and I hesitate, like the beauty of, and I think it's really hard, the beauty of getting everybody in the room together is there's no confusion. Felicia doesn't wonder what I said, she knows what I said. Paul doesn't wonder, right? We're not hearing it third hand, we're not hearing things on the street about this or that. We're in the room together having that conversation. And this is gonna be a push to get us to come back to this place where we are actually, and it's gonna be a little bit of a sacrifice to some degree, I think. And ultimately, if we wanna be a stronger Lake County, it's gonna take that level of investment and engagement. And it might mean, no, Laura, I don't think you can make every single thing by yourself. I don't think any of us can.
I think it's unrealistic for anybody to expect you to be the only point person at the city.
100%.
I think that's completely unrealistic. And I think, this is just my perspective, I think from an outsider looking in, there's so much turnover on city council and a lack of interest in even running for city council seats, that I would hope that the city looks at that and says, like, what can we do for continuity inside, right? Because we know that you're not gonna be here forever. or in this role forever, and so what is the next
Hope
step
to be
in?
here for, you know something I don't actually.
I mean, yeah.
So let's do this, because in the interest of time.
Past your tenure, then what is the next step for the city, right? Like, we don't, I think our goal is the same as yours, is to make sure that the city is successful so that we have successful partnerships. But if there's already a lack of interest in leadership in the city, how do you continue that as an organization to be able to fulfill community-wide obligations and get to a point where we can have a swimming pool with PD swims? So that things aren't falling through the cracks unintentionally.
And let's do this. I think all of those things are valid on all sides, and not to get lost in the minutia of each one. Let's just get them up on the list. We don't need to decide on everything today and have everything be perfect today. I'm gonna take a picture of the list, I'm gonna get it out to everybody, and our next pieces will involve this piece. And part of what we're doing is we're affecting this right now. Today affects it, right? So we are already changing it a tiny bit by showing up. What are the other pieces that address this communication? Sorry, you're next.
And this is at a lower level.
Perfect.
In all the meetings that I've been in recently, it seems that unless we are specifically an item on the agenda, you have moments for public speaking. And they come at the beginning of the meeting. And it's at the end of the meeting where you want to ask questions. After having heard what went on, you've got all kinds of questions you would like to ask, maybe not, well, I don't mean instead of an agenda item, but it seems like it would make, for us, for people who just want to go to the meeting and listen, that they should have an opportunity at the end of the meeting to ask questions and bring up subjects that were not elucidated properly or whatever.
Like you hear a presentation and you weren't able to question about it during that presentation.
Yeah,
And
it's
what's
like,
the mechanism for
you
addressing
give your
it?
presentation, you might as well walk out because you weren't on the, you weren't really on the agenda, you were just in the public speaking part, and they don't really have to address that. And I think that was part of my feeling about how we didn't feel like we were often being heard.
Or we weren't invited.
Well, no, you're always invited to make public.
Well,
to
no,
go
but I
for
mean,
public.
PD Spoons, not being invited to a meeting about a rec center, recreation or the pool.
I'm not familiar with that.
Sorry.
But anyway, I think that you got my point.
I've got your point, and I'm thinking on what to write exactly, because I think part of that requires a structural review of how a meeting is run. And it might be something different, and we might need to think about that one just a tiny bit, but I hear you, and it's, what's the mechanism for questioning and reflective listening?
Or some kind of an interchange, a conversation between the people who are speaking publicly and the board of whoever.
Or identifying when it needs to be a work session, because what's there needs to be more publicly discussed. Let me think on that a little bit. Jeff?
Well, it needs to, specifically on the rec center and pool, and I think we need to hone in on what the planning is, how is the planning going to happen as early as possible in 24?
Yeah.
And I don't mean to hop or like crush the work with the CU students, but I think we need, I've been part of several projects with CU students, and there's some great ideas, but I think we need a more professional, deeper level of planning that will require like hiring, like the pool consultants. Like I think we need to have like a real clear funded like planning consultants on the facility options, like what are a couple locations, what buildings fit there, what programming needs can be met at different scales on those sites, and then sort of like a parallel track of some funding options. Maybe that could be done in-house. I don't think we need to hire someone, but I feel like we need to pretty quickly, so that it can get in our 24 budgets, like, some thinking on what the scope of work and what kind of consultants we need to nail down the facility planning side of it. I mean, I think quite a lot of work's gone on in the LCIS site, but not a lot of planning on other potential site identification of and planning on other sites. And I just think, I mean, we need to dig into that at a pretty deep level. I mean, not like construction documents, but like, you know, like even to the point of like soil testing, like, is it gonna cost $1 million to prepare site X? Like, so you don't have, you know, I mean, all the stuff that we run into with every single housing or justice center, any project that you touch in this community, you hit huge surprises on who owns the land, how contaminated it is, what utilities are there, do you have an access road, like all the things. And I think I would just love to be able to answer that like by mid-year 24. And have like a small enough number of options you can sort of have it in your head. So anyway, that's my, I mean, yeah, so.
So on that, Jeff, can we hold that for 1 second? And what I think, like, that's where I'd like to end personally is like what are the next steps?
Yeah.
So what's the next meeting that we need to have? How close is it? What's the cadence of that? And just so that we capture communication pieces and make sure that we are, like, what else needs to happen there? That was sort of that was when you went to the bathroom, you're supposed to think about. I really thought about it quick.
Tamara, sorry, Wendy, I was wondering if it would be beneficial to use PB Swims as a resource. Because we have so much documentation, we have an operating plan, we have all kinds of things that we've been working on over the years. And instead of being the squeaky wheel, I think Elaine and Jill and the rest of the PB Swims committee would be really a valuable resource instead of just another silo perhaps that's trying to get things done. And Jane's in Argentina right now. I almost said Afghanistan, that was wrong. Argentina. And she's been our fearless leader, but she knows this stuff in her head. And we have, you know, a Google Docs section where there are documents that go back decades. So using us as a resource instead of as I don't know what word to use, an antagonist, I think would really help everybody. That's my thought.
I'm with you, Wendy. I do see that hopefully as well. And again, I think that's potentially even you become a part of the communication plan.
Well, there's a study going on with CU. Should we?
Sorry, we lost internet.
Yeah.
In a lot of the conversations, we truly do communicate, yet the message out there, if these 15, 16 people start telling them, man, the community, county, city, school district, everyone is reaching out, they are communicating. We all have to be bought in that it is the new way, it is our path forward. We do talk, we do communicate.
We become the model of that and a model of collective communication.
If each of us communicate with 10 people, that spreads super fast. Leadville's mindset shift is city, county, do talk, we do communicate.
Do I know everybody who's here? Perfect.
Yeah.
So when we set the next meeting, because I do want to get to that, but I think there's also a thread that gets started so that communication could actually be an email thread as well, and that there is some different mechanisms around that. But I agree with you, we're the model. And it's not what we say, it's what everybody sees us do and how they see, oh, Paul isn't saying, I didn't know about that. Oh, I didn't hear about that. But we're all saying, yep, that's what we're talking about. And we start to have that presence about us. Okay. In the interest of time, and this back to you, Linda, now, I want to think about what are the next steps that we want to shoot for? What is the next session? And is that next session a planning session, in effect? With Adam, which I know he's off. Tim, he said that you were fully prepared to speak on his behalf.
Yeah. Well, I guess I would, whatever happens next, or with, you know, the meetings, like to Paul's point, like the idea that people do communicate, but also it has to be like kind of that ethos of collaboration, right? Like it's not a pissing match, it's what is for the best of the community, and collaboration is giving and taking. But to level set just with everyone, if we're talking through these things between, you know, the library, the pros department, seniors, and goal, what the county spends and what were my 22 actuals was $3.7 million on that. And that's operations, that's FTE and operations, that's not facility maintenance, that's not all those other things. So it's $3.7 million for those 4 departments. So that's not an all-in cost, but like when we talk about planning or any of these things, like how are you going to pay for it? And as, you know, working with the commissioners on prioritizing your budget, right? Like some people aren't going to get what they want. Some of my department directors are not going to get what they want. Their budgets are gonna stay stagnant. But like really, what does that look like of like having that funding mechanism? And understanding like, yeah, how to collaborate on that. Because the county's financial contribution is huge.
Yeah, I have budget planning being a part of that as well, right? So do you see from, speaking kind of on behalf of pros and you, but Adam as well, the next session, what would you see as the next step there?
I mean, for me, I think it's just kind of the baselining of like where everyone is at, what does everyone provide, right? Like we can provide you everything that the county does. We can go through all of Brenna and Vanessa and Karen and Fee's programming and show what is offered.
We'll go back
We
to the
can do
PowerPoint I
that.
had in place for today.
Yeah, right. I mean, we can do that. We can talk about the budgets just so people know that you're talking about millions of dollars. What does that look like? And then, you know, going from there, what would be city contribution? What would PB Swim's, you know, contribution or the collaboration look like?
Yep. So maybe the next meeting is really mapping out the steps. Like what is it might not need to be a 3-hour session, but let's get it mapped out in terms of how are we gonna tackle it timeline wise? To your point, Jeff, is that kind of what you're looking for as well in terms of, I mean, budget season is here. We've got to be thinking about it, and particularly as it pertains to 2024, but overall gauging for the next 5 years too. And again, I would see it taking it in steps. So we need to know what the steps are, what's the first priority to keep this moving and to keep everybody at the table and engaged. And I think that's where, Linda, the pieces that you're speaking about are really relevant. I feel like it's a bigger conversation. That's why I meant to just pause for a second. It wasn't to stop it, but to say, I personally don't see any reason that you're not participating, but that's a bigger conversation. Does anybody have any immediate thoughts there around Linda's question about the CU piece?
Oh, CU? I was offering that up. I don't think, we're not even there yet, like having meetings with them. So
Well, I understood from earlier that there was going to be another pros feasibility study with
Right.
CU students.
Right.
The last time there was a feasibility study, the pool
I misunderstood.
was excluded.
Oh, gotcha.
And so now that
You will not be excluded.
we don't want to be excluded anymore.
You will not be excluded.
And we do have, going back to what Wendy had said, we have research, we have information, we have our history, we have our plans. We are a valuable commodity in
resource.
regaining a pool.
100%.
So we would like to be communicated with.
We would like that too.
As opposed to being an aside.
This is important that we're all together, and I think to your point about the feasibility study, I think that will be a part of the next planning steps is what is that, if we're doing feasibility study, is it CU, who is it, and what does that look like, and that'll be a part of it.
I hate to see another feasibility study.
Understood, yeah.
I think we already have been through that several times.
And I think that will probably need a little longer than we have today to talk through the different points on that and make sure, again, collectively, that we arrive somewhere with what is important. So how do we move forward from here, which is, I think, the next session, 2 weeks out, 1 week out? What are some, Tim, are you with me?
No, always here.
I think we want to keep momentum moving.
With the clear
We wanna
calendar.
We want to
Yeah.
keep, with the clear, I got all kinds of time, no problem. Keep things moving forward, but then also try to weigh it against timing. We know that budget is a critical component, but I think also mapping out at least the next 4 steps. Like what, and Adam needs to be here for that as well.
Yeah, and sorry, can I mean, I like super respectfully disagree that we have like enough feasibility studies done. I think there's been a lot of work done on what's possible at the LCIS site, but I don't think there's been a lot of work done on what's possible and what it would cost at other sites and what the pros and cons are there. And to me anyway, I think before we would go to the community and get permission to spend, a very non-trivial amount of money, on either renovating the existing LCIS site or building a new facility, I think we do need to do some more assessment of what are, not 10 vague options, but what would work for
Well,
two,
I mean,
3
yeah,
sites.
and we're talking about combining our other facilities, so this is really a bigger strategic plan. I do get a little bit of frustration because I hear that, oh, this big new thing is, we're really trying to address all the pieces of getting something in place that's going to last. And I think we might need to have another conversation about like appreciating and respecting the information that we have a staff to do all of this work, who is doing all of this work, who knows. We have additional staff to do financials. None of this is a surprise to us.
Well, we're not being paid for our work. We're doing it out of our passion and our desire for a pool. The last study gave us, we know what the last study gave us in the parking lot. We're also not wanting to wait 10, 15 years. And the priority list, we're number 5, 6, 7, 8. Who knows where we'll be on the priority list. When we have a manageable location to put maybe 5 million, less than 10 million in, from what information we have gathered. And I know we disagree. I've got in writing anywhere from 4 to 14 million, but we're not there because it keeps getting put out. So I guess you can see my frustration with another feasibility study where we'll go through another year of somebody from outside studying our situation and coming back to us with something that's, well, hopefully not as insulting as the last round, so. But there needs to be some communication. The rec department in this town must include a pool. And that seems to be why we're here today, hopefully, so that people can agree with that. In some way, shape, or manner, we need a pool in our community.
Well,
Not in 2039,
Well,
I want it soon.
I was just gonna say that in that 10-year visioning piece from the pros document, that is listed as like number 1, right? And so I think Adam is working on.
The prior one, the one that was done, that it was.
No, the new one.
The new one. Oh, it was also.
It's in there.
It was also number 1 in the old one.
And so Adam Bay is taking that information looking at that from a holistic feasibility approach with the other work that we have had done with cost recovery, with deferred maintenance across multiple facilities and multiple locations, and what facilities can we combine and put into place in one location that then in turn lowers the county's insurance liabilities. And so it's a big strategic piece. And so you can imagine that the feasibility work might take 6 months for us to find that location, like Jeff was saying, but I think we would do ourselves a disservice not having that information available to us, right? And I don't, as far as the cost goes, I can't speak on the cost and the disagreement with the cost. I think that comes from the school district. Is that from the school district planning that you were talking about?
We did a complete one-for-one, replace it as it currently sits. The budget was right at 14 million for, would have been the ask on the, had it been included.
That's not the quotes that we got from the pool company.
And with
So I
that,
think-
2.5 million is truly just aquatic center cost. A lot of the additional cost comes to the facility.
Wait a minute, explain that.
Yeah.
What
That's
else would be, what's 14 million gonna pay
the
for?
water lines, sewer lines, just all the rehabbing all the tile, the flooring, the showers.
ADA.
Yeah, but I'd like to see that whole thing broken down.
It'll be part of the school district's addendum to the master plan that should be out. We asked for it last Tuesday. It should be, we might see it tomorrow.
Okay.
And it'll be on the website as soon as it is a final product, so.
And what I'm seeing is we do get back to this in our next meeting. So we get a little bit of clarity around all of those elements. And we get into the next steps quickly in terms of what they are, mapping them out, and feasibility studies on there, budgets on there, in that inclusion of that discussion.
And it would be, maybe it's in my email somewhere or on our website, but it would be great to have access to the BB Swims stuff if that's shareable.
I will get an email thread going with everybody in the room, and then you will be able to update and share those pieces. And also, I think as the things with the school become available as well, I mean, this is where we start to model being a collective, and we're gonna move through some some rough waters for a minute, I think, in that process, but we're all aiming towards the same goal at the end of the day. And there is some gaps that we all don't have all the information for, and that is the point of having everybody in the same room and working towards this. 2 weeks out?
What's
I mean, I'll
that,
get with Liz, but
September- I think the morning of September 25th is open for all of us.
is that a Monday?
Yeah.
And I have to go to Trinidad after that, so that works on my end.
Sorry about that.
Nope, nine to how long do you want us to try to set it for? And I can.
I say 9 to noon.
Oh, I'm gonna say 9 to noon also. And let's, at this point, I'm gonna get the email thread going, which means we can put forward, now we can start to share presentations in front of that event. We've got a list of people who we think will be here, all these different pieces, and then we can start to share shared information and documents. And you'll have a tremendous amount of work. I got to look at some of it. Did not get to get through all of it yet, but there's a tremendous amount there, and I think that's a very important resource to have added to this email thread and that everybody has. So come into that next meeting prepared to look at some of those pieces, hear a little bit more maybe from Paul on what you saw in some of those pieces in terms of the bids and what it was for, and just really mapping it out. And let's make sure everybody has the same information, because I think we're missing some pieces here.
The other question I have is how do we get the message across immediately to
Okay.
Okay.
Did you already say it?
Thanks, Jen.
Liz will send it out to us. Yeah.